going on, everybody? Eliot here. Latest episode of the No Huddle Show. I'm here with Matt Lombardo as usual. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody. In this week's game, as we said on the last episode, our Hot Take podcast, this week's Chicago Bears matchup, we're not going to get into position-by-position breakdown. It's just not that interesting, let's be honest. No one wants to hear that. So this is officially the Alshon episode. It's Alshon's return against his old team. Every episode, it seems like we always say, I don't want to get into the Alshon debate. Today, we're getting into it. Today, we're going to talk about Alshon. We're going to talk about whether he's going to come back. We're going to talk about how he's been this season, what our expectations were, what the Eagles should do. And then, I guess we'll both pick how many points the Eagles will win by at the end of the episode. But the first, and of course, they'll lose now. I think let's start, though, with our review. We like to read a fan review for our preview pod, even though this is the official Alshon pod. Matt, why don't you go first?
Yeah, this one comes in from Johnny U. Drums. His headline is just awesome. It's a 5-star review. He says, I live in Los Angeles, but I'm born and raised in Philly. It's so great to be able to have the No Huddle Show podcast to get all the details and opinions I want to know about. I love that it's on multiple times a week, and when you guys had your mini bye, I was going through withdrawal. So thank you, fellas. Have a great Thanksgiving, and I look forward to more podcasts. So thank you, Johnny U. Drums. Thank you for the 5-star review, and we're sorry for the bye week. Hopefully you have a great Thanksgiving. Eat a lot of stuffing, eat a lot of pumpkin pie, and enjoy what should be a pretty easy game for the Eagles on Sunday.
I'm not big on pumpkin pie, to be honest. To be honest.
My goodness. Between the not pumpkin pie and the cottage cheese on your spaghetti.
Yeah.
I don't know if I could ever
I would
dinner
say
with you.
Carrot cake.
Oh,
I like better than pumpkin pie.
Get
Apple
the hell
pie.
out of here.
Apple pie I like better than pumpkin pie. And pineapple upside down cake. That's not a pie, though.
That's not a pie.
Yeah, it was not a pie. But I would say
those I can't even think of the most bizarre food combination.
Blueberry pie, maybe.
Okay.
I'm just not a big pumpkin pie guy. But teach his own. And thank you, Johnny U. Jumps, for the review.
Yep.
So my review I'm going to read is, I think it transitions nicely into the first question I want to ask you. So it's How You Like Howie Roseman Now by Stupid Howie Haters. 5-star review, which we love. And the review is simply Howie Roseman, Howie Roseman, Howie Roseman, Joe Douglas, Joe Douglas, Joe Douglas. Nicely put, Stupid Howie Haters. So I was thinking about this, and before we get completely into the Alshon debate, so I've always been critical of Howie. And let me ask you this question. It's kind of a hypothetical, big picture question. Were the people that thought that in training camp, we thought the running backs were an issue, we thought the cornerbacks were an issue, we thought depth overall was an issue?
Linebacker depth in particular, which is getting tested to a certain degree with Hicks being out.
Right. So Howie did make some moves. I mean, he traded for Darby in training camp. But were we wrong, or are players just outperforming? So I guess my question is, and I'm not taking anything away from Howie. I agree with you. He deserves to be in the GM, or whatever you want to call him, year of that award. But my question is Howie getting lucky in the way that players are just simply outperforming, or did he see this coming and he correctly evaluated? And again, I don't mean this as a knock to Howie. I'm just saying, like, were we wrong and Howie's right, or was it more in the middle?
Well, I think that this season, Elliot, is kind of a lot of things, and it's kind of a combination of both of those perspectives. Number one, I touched on it a little bit on the Monday pod, recapping the Cowboy game. You know, the Eagles really, in a lot of ways, lucked into their circumstance this season in terms of the rest of the NFL. You think about Aaron Rodgers being down, now the Green Bay Packers are irrelevant. You think about Ezekiel Elliott going through a 6-game suspension. The Cowboys lose Tyron Smith. They lose Sean Lee. They're a non-factor in the NFC East. Odell Beckham goes down. The Giants implode. Injuries across the league. David Johnson with the Arizona Cardinals. That's one less team that you have to deal with. And the Seahawks really didn't do a good enough job addressing their offensive line, particularly from a depth perspective. So that's number one. I think that if anybody got lucky, I think the Eagles overall got lucky with how this season is playing out and how healthy they are. But I think that we have to give Howie Roseman credit. Maybe he wasn't, quote-unquote, right, but you look at the depth on this roster. You look at guys that are stepping in and contributing at linebacker. Joe Walker's playing meaningful snaps, and we talked about whether you could hide at inside linebacker or not. I don't know that you've really noticed that Jordan Hicks hasn't been out there because Michael Kendricks and Joe Walker have played well. Halapoulivaati Vaitai has stepped in and improved every week for Jason Peters, whereas you look at the Cowboys and they lose Tyron Smith and they have to go through 2 and 3 backup players who are turnstiles at tackle anyway, Chaz Green being benched being one of them. So I think that Howie deserves a lot of credit for the foresight of building a roster with quality depth. That goes back to last year's draft class. And Joe Douglas deserves a lot of credit for finding undrafted free agent gems like Corey Clement and, this team drafting Derek Barnett and getting meaningful snaps from him.
So to me, the example of maybe Howie getting lucky, and I can already see people saying I'm trying to take away from Howie, but is Rasul Douglas. Week 1, he's a healthy scratch. So clearly they didn't feel he was completely ready to play.
They did not want to play him
right.
at
Week
the start of
2,
the year, maybe not
he
this
plays.
year.
Week 3, I think he starts. Because Week 2 was Jalen Watkins. So they start Jalen Watkins over him at corner. Then Rasul Douglas has to go in. And he ends up playing really good football for 7 or 8 weeks or whatever it was. So I guess that would be, to me, an example of, did Howie correctly evaluate? Or they evaluated overall correctly, because I think Rasul Douglas is going to be good. But are players just playing above their head? I think it's an interesting question. We can move on to Alshon. But
I think that it's an interesting thought, given that one of the reasons I think that they're in the position they are at 9-1 is because of the depth, and Rasul Douglas is part of that depth, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, everybody, and you see Eagles fans throwing shade at Cowboy fans on Twitter and this back and forth, which I think is kind of silly, because the bigger thing isn't just Dak Prescott versus Carson Wentz. It's not Darren Sproles versus the value of Ezekiel Elliott. It's the fact that Howie Roseman and the Eagles franchise built a roster that was able to withstand injuries to key players, whereas the Cowboys have not been able to do that. And whether Rasul Douglas was coached up by Corey Undlin and Jim Schwartz, whether he was evaluated properly as a third-round pick, and there are third-round picks who pan out and contribute as rookies right away, whatever the case may be, he's playing well at this point.
Right.
And the Eagles have him because Joe Douglas and because Howie Roseman drafted him in the third round. And he's just one example. You can talk about trading for Ronald Darby, and you saw what he did on Sunday night and the value that he brings to the secondary. I just think that top to bottom in a 53-man roster, we were talking about the other day, most teams, if you had to bring in a kicker, if you had to, under an emergency circumstance, could cut a backup offensive lineman or a fourth-string linebacker.
Right. With this team, I'm not sure who you cut.
Right. You said it yourself. There isn't that luxury because of the roster that they've built, and I think that that's one of the key reasons, along with Wentz, that they're 9-1.
So with that being said of their roster and the roster Howie's built, let's get into Alshon. So currently right now, 38 catches, 567 yards, 6 touchdowns. Obviously, he's the story this week because the Bears are coming back. He said he's not, of course he said what you would expect. He's not, interested in just playing the Bears to get revenge. He's focused on the Eagles. He wants to win, et cetera, et cetera. But as of right now, 38 catches, 567 yards, 6 touchdowns. On pace, if he keeps this up, and I think he's going to exceed his pace, but 60 catches, 907 yards, 9.5 touchdowns. So I think, and I'm guessing you'll agree, we're looking at a receiver that's going to finish with roughly 1,000 yards, maybe a little over, a little under, and 10 touchdowns.
And isn't that what we expected back in camp?
Well, that's not what I expected. I mean, I thought Zach Ertz would lead the team in receiving, and I think he's still on pace to do that.
Yep.
Yeah, he's still on pace to it. Alshon, I think if we recorded this podcast, and we talked about him throughout the season, but if we record the all-Alshon podcast after week 5, I think we're talking about a little differently than we are now. The interesting thing about Alshon is, even in the Cowboys game, what did he finish with? 50 yards receiving?
67 and
a touchdown.
And one touchdown. And a 2-point conversion.
Right,
catch.
yeah.
Yep.
So, good game. Still hasn't topped 100 yards this year. I think Alshon is still what he is, which is a very, very good number 2 receiver, not a completely dominant number 1 receiver.
Okay, we have – let's establish the ground rules of what we deem number 1 receivers and elite receivers. To me, if you're a top 32 receiver in terms of yards, catches, and the meaningful statistics, I think that makes you a quote-unquote number 1 receiver.
Well, but here'll be my counter to that, though.
If you're top 10, I think you're elite.
Okay, but here'll be my counter to that. There's 32 starting quarterbacks in the NFL, right? Yep. So I would argue, though, that the 27th, however you want to rank them, is not a number 1 quarterback. They're just starting. And I would say the same for corners. So I see your point about how if you're top 32, then I guess in theory you are a number 1 type guy. But I just think when I look at – all right, so first of all, I'm looking right now. In yards, he's currently 26th in the NFL.
Okay.
So
that fits. I mean, we're going to have different definitions of number 1s, right? I mean, elite to me is top 10. And I think that Alshon Jeffery isn't elite, but I think that he's a quote-unquote number 1.
I'm trying to find him in catches. So I based off this list, off NFL.com, he's not even in the top 50 in catches. because he has 38, so he'd be tied for 50th. So his numbers still aren't great. I agree with you. I think like when you're talking about elite guys, this is like when we used to get in the Sam Bradford debate, and I would say he's not a franchise quarterback, and you'd say, well, he's a pretty good quarterback, and then obviously injuries derailed him.
Right.
But I just think, to me, there's only like 5 or 6 really true number one elite receivers in the NFL, and then the rest, there's a second level that are pretty good.
And
I think Alshon's in that third level. I think he is not in like the second level of guys like all right, here's an example. I haven't watched a ton of Viking games, so take this with a grain of salt, but Adam Thielen from the Vikings. Great numbers this year. Would I say he's like a number one physically dominant receiver? I don't know if I would, but I think he's in that second class. Or like DeAndre Hopkins, I don't care what his numbers are, he's a number one.
I agree.
He
might even be elite. I think that you.
That's what I mean. Right?
Category.
He's an elite guy. Right? Like Julio Jones. Like these are elite guys we're talking about. Dez Bryant, the elite guys. I think Alshon's below them, and I think he's like significantly below them.
Okay, I'll also say this, that if we want to talk about what Alshon's doing this year, Terrell Pryor, I think, is the comp, because both these guys signed on the first day of free agency. They both went from new teams, new quarterbacks, new situations. Terrell Pryor, 20 catches, 240 yards, and 1 touchdown.
Yeah, he's been a disappointment.
I think there's something to be said for the time that it takes. We've talked about this back since July and August, and we kind of were beating that drum, and now you're starting to see halfway through the season, and we talked about this after the San Francisco game, that, okay, Alshon is starting to heat up, and I think that you're starting to see him emerge as that quote-unquote, as I say, number one, as you say, potentially the Eagles, quote-unquote, number one, not in the NFL per se, but I think that it takes time for quarterbacks and receivers to get on the same page. You're starting to see it. And I think that if you're a wide receiver who posts a 1,000-yard, 9 to 12 touchdown caliber season, I don't care if you want to use the word elite or not. I think, in my opinion, that type of production labels you as a number one.
And I think that is fair. I think if he gets 1,000 yards and 10-plus touchdowns, then I do think he can hit the free agency market if that is what he ends up doing, and teams that sign him can view him as signing like a number one receiver. I just don't think he is like a dominant receiver. So and the reason that matters is this, is because we're talking about how much you're going to pay him. So I'm looking at the contracts in the NFL at receiver right now. If you look at the average amount, the top in the league is DeAndre Hopkins. He averaged $16 million a year. Clearly, Alshon's not going to get that. Even though, when he was a free agent last year, before he actually hit the market, everyone was saying, oh, well, he's going to get $13, $14 million. He ended up getting $9.5 million. So, clearly, he didn't get that. But
well, let's take one small baby step back here.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, let's look at the wide receiver position in free agency, and you tell me.
This year or last year?
Coming up.
Okay.
Here are some names that are going to be available.
All right, nice.
Alshon Jeffery.
Go ahead. All right.
Terrell Pryor.
Okay.
Mike Wallace, who's like 115 years old.
Right, yeah, not
Sammy
that good.
Watkins.
Who's having a better year.
Eric Decker might re-sign, by the way, Watkins in L.A. to play with Goff. Harry Douglas, who's a fringe.
Not even sure who that is.
Yeah, slot receiver, former Falcon, current Tennessee Titan. Taylor Gabriel. Dontrell Inman.
All right, your point's made.
You know what I'm saying?
Right,
so if we want to say that Alshon Jeffery is not going to command $16 million on the open market, if he's the best option available, depending on teams' cap space, I think there's a chance there could be a team, if he's the guy who's available, that could wind up getting between 13 and 15.
And here's the thing I'll say.
If not more.
So we're very close to this situation. So, we interact with Alshon multiple times a week. So that is, of course, going to impact and affect our opinion of him. That's just his reality of the situation. And teams around the league will hear about how Alshon is in the NovaCare complex. But
to me, give Josh Bellamy $10 million?
No, I'm not doing that. But what I was gonna say was, I think Alshon's increased his value. I think he's going to end up with 10 touchdowns. He's going to end up with 1,000 yards. And I think he's shown this year, obviously in Chicago, he's coming off the PD suspension. He was injury prone. He looks like he's going to play all 16 games this year. And not only that, I think there were kind of rumblings. The Bears didn't bring him back. You didn't hear great things about him out of Chicago. I think he's been an absolutely first-class model teammate for this organization.
Matthew Slater going to make $10 million?
Yeah, maybe with Howie paying. But So I think he's increased his value. So you're not going to get him for less than $9.5 million.
Which I think is why he came here in the first place.
Right.
I think
so he's accomplished that goal.
Right.
But my point is part of the way he's increased his value in my eyes is off the field as well. And I think there's something to be said for that. That makes up for a little bit of the fact that he's not going to have, like 15 touchdowns or whatever. So if you look at contracts, I mean, DeAndre Hopkins $16 million. Julio Jones 14, Des Bryant 14, and these are averages.
You have to project out that the cap is going to go up this year. It's going to continue to go up.
All right, so
he's the best of the bunch.
All right, so what do you think he's going to get paid?
I think that, as we touched on Tuesday, I think the Eagles, if they're going to extend another player before the offseason, I think they got to go full court press to make it Alshon.
All right, but my question is, if you're Alshon, do you take less now?
Well,
Part of me feels like you do because, first of all, you have another 6 games of potentially risking injury.
Yep.
And you're in a good situation. It seems like he likes it here. You're on either them or the Patriots or the Steelers, the best teams in the NFL, maybe the Saints. But so I think you maybe take a little less. But look, Alshon and his agent are not stupid.
Right.
I mean, they've probably been talking about this list of potential free agents since they even signed with the Eagles.
And that's probably why they did it, because they knew the cap was going up. The teams were a little more cap-strapped last year, and they had a chance to come with Carson Wentz and increase their value. I mean, listen, I don't know if I'm Alshon Jeffery that I'd take less money under any circumstance. I think that his whole strategy was come to Philadelphia to get paid, and I think he still cashes in. But if I'm the Eagles, I'm trying to throw funny money in the back end of that deal to make it look like he's going to make more than he's going to make.
Well, all right, so 15 receivers in the NFL right now have a contract that averages $10 million or more a year.
Okay.
So he's probably getting $10 million or more a year. I mean, he's going to be the top free agent receiver.
Would you pay him 13?
Would I pay him $13 million? I mean, I wouldn't pay him. See, but the other part of this equation is if the Eagles, let's say they make it to the NFC Championship game, right? Like, the success of this team is going to factor in whether they re-sign Alshon. Because if, let's say, he keeps exactly on pace, he finishes with what we said, 9.5 touchdowns, roughly 1,000 yards, and then he has a bad playoff game and they lose, right? Then I think you can say, all right, Alshon's good, but we can replace him. But if he, takes it up another level, which I think is more likely just because he's getting on the same page with Wentz, all those things, and they make it to the NFC Championship game, or, I don't want to say God forbid win the Super Bowl, but I'm just talking from a purely cap perspective. If your team wins the Super Bowl, players are going to want more money.
There's another wrinkle here. Let me just finish.
Sure. If that happens, then I think, how do you let this guy walk for $13 million? I mean, if he's a key part of your offense for a team that either made the Super Bowl or almost made the Super Bowl, that is not going to sit well, and it not sit well with fans. And there's something to be said for then, I think Alshon's replaceable, but you want to bring back the same team as close as possible.
Yeah, and there's another wrinkle here. The wrinkle is, and we talked about this right after the draft, where I know that you were staunchly in the Alshon Jeffery 1 year, not worth a long-term contract camp after they brought him in.
Right.
And my whole philosophy on what they did by drafting Mac Hollins and Shelton Gibson, even though Hollins has shown some flashes, Gibson has been a non-factor, and it looks like he's a pretty long ways away from actually contributing. Mm-hmm. My thought was that they brought Alshon Jeffery and Torrey Smith here to kind of ease Carson Wentz into having playmakers,
right,
facilitate this monumental leap in terms of his development that we've seen him take, and then hand the reins off next season at receiver to Hollins, Gibson, and whoever they draft in 2018. Those guys haven't shown me enough.
You can't do that.
Those guys have not shown me enough that they can step in. And my bigger picture thought here is, I don't know that you can take one offseason of giving Carson Wentz these weapons and not making sure that you bring arguably the number 1 or number 2 weapon in the passing attack in Alshon Jeffery, not bring him back.
That's my thing. You can't let Torrey Smith and Alshon walk. Because either A, if you do that, you either have to be sure a guy you're drafting in the first round is going to be able to contribute, or you're going to have to sign a guy, and off the list you just read, there's nobody out there.
Right.
So you can't let both go. The obvious one you let go is Torrey because he saves you money. I mean, obviously Alshon's not against the books, but Torrey saves you, gets you an extra $5 million in cap space, and that's the other part of this, the cap space equation. I mean, before the Timmy Jernigan extension, and cap space numbers are projected. They're not always perfect. The Eagles were projected to have around $12 million in cap space. Now, $12 million
is fine.
It's not that fine, though, because you have to pay – first of all, you have to pay your rookie class out of that.
Okay.
Your first round pick's going to make around $3 million.
Yep.
You're going to end up using they don't have a second and third round pick, so it works out a little better.
But we know the way that Howie Roseman structures contracts, he's not going to front load an Alshon Jeffery deal with $10 million against the cap.
Right, but I guess what I'm saying is you had $12 million to start.
Yep.
Jernigan's deal averages, it's a 4-year, $48 million. So, yeah, I agree that it's going to be backloaded and all those things, but it's going to have to be at least 6 or 7, you would think, next year, right? I mean, I can't imagine it's going to be less than 5. Let's just say it's 5. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's fair.
All right, so that brings you down to 7. Then you
5
pay
goes to your rookie class. Maybe
it's
going
to
to
be a little less, right? It's going to, let's say
picks.
3 to be conservative.
Sure.
So that's $8 million. Now you're down to $4 million. Now clearly you'll cut guys. Torrey Smith saves you 5. Brent Selleck saves you, I think, another 4 or 5.
I don't think Darren Sproles is back.
Well, yeah, but he was a free agent.
Gotcha.
So, but I mean, so there are guys you cut. Maybe if you get rid of Vinny Curry, maybe, but he saves you $6 million, but he leaves $5 million on the books. And as we discussed, as much as I'm ready to make Barnett a starter, I think there's something to be said for depth. And I actually think Curry will be back, but Michael Kendricks is a possibility. And then you also remember you have to re-sign Nigel Bradham,
and you have to start thinking about a Carson Wentz extension.
right? So that's the tricky part of this. Like, the Eagles are not in a great shape financially, and the other thing is you don't want to spend up to the cap. The Eagles have always had extra money, and because it rolls over. Number one, but number two, it's just smart because then now Ajayi doesn't have a huge cap hit, but you're able to trade for guys like Darby and Ajayi because you have a plethora of, at least comparatively for right now, a plethora of cap space.
And you can see down the line some guys restructuring contracts. You can see somebody like Zach Ertz,
Malcolm Jenkins restructuring
Jason
Kelce,
his deal.
I think, is a prime restructure guy.
Yep. If Kelsey's going to be back, I think he's back here only because of the fact that he restructures his deal.
Well, I think he's back even if he doesn't, but I think he will restructure because I think it's worth it to him. They'll extend him; he'll get more benefit. I mean, Jason Peters. I mean, had they not touched Jason Peters' deal, they could have cut him and saved $12 million. There's your Alshon right there.
Right.
There's $12 million right there for Alshon. So, let's say the Eagles, fudge their way up to $17 to $20 million in cap space. If you're looking at an Alshon deal that pays him like $7 million the first year and then it progressively goes up, yeah. But if you're looking at an Alshon deal where some team's going to overpay and pay him $14 million a year for 4 years and, he gets a ton of it up front, I don't know. I agree. Look, Alshon is much more a bigger part of this offense than I would have thought. Now, I shouldn't say thought. I just mean, I'm less willing to let Alshon walk than I used to. But, again, the numbers are what the numbers are. I don't know. I mean, I think maybe you trust Howie in a situation like this. He knows more about the cap space than we do.
Right.
They announced a deal today, where he's getting $12 million a year. I'll assume that Howie knows what he's doing, even though, to get back to our original question, I think a lot of Howie's extensions have not been great.
Well,
I think Vinny Curry, Jason Peters.
Okay, I'll go to the other side of that. And those are bad contracts. Brent Selleck, that was a complete waste in my opinion.
Right,
I don't think that you needed to make that kind of deal, and I don't think that his role in this team justifies that kind of contract. But the Lane Johnson extension is a brilliant one because if you ultimately move him to left tackle, you got him early. Mm-hmm. You got him at
he
right
also
tackle
got suspended
money.
10 games last year. Just
right,
saying.
but that's over with.
Right.
And he's currently the best offensive tackle in football, and he's going to be for a while, in my opinion. So you have that extension. The Zach Ertz extension was a great extension. I think the Vinny Curry deal initially was a mistake, but if he continues to be productive, it's going to look better over time. So I don't know how – I think that my point that I'm trying to make is the good proactive extensions that were made after Chip Kelly was gone in this Howie Roseman 2.0, I think they just about balance out against the bad deals, if not exceed them.
Yeah, I think that's fair. But I guess what I'm saying is, so let's say you have around $20 million, $17 to $20 million. I mean, are you giving Alshon 13? At the very least, if you re-sign Alshon to a big deal and you re-sign Jernigan and you re-sign Bradham.
Right.
And
also
Wentz, for what it's worth, I'm not saying he's on the priority list, but LeGarrette Blount, great teammate, been productive this year. I mean,
Corey Clement and Jay Ajayi, you're going to be
but maybe as your third. I'm not that he's a big money guy.
Right.
I'm just saying the reality of a winning team is a lot of players have to play well to get there.
Sure.
And the Eagles are in a situation where it's working out great because they're 9-1, everyone's playing great, blah blah. But you got to like this roster could be in for a ton of turnover.
It could
and
be,
I
but
think
let me
that
ask you this
losing
real
Alshon
quick.
protects you from that a little bit, especially on the offensive side.
But I
of the
think that you downgrade your offense fairly significantly in the passing game because of his
Agreed.
production and because of the space that's opened up for Aguilar. I mean, if you're going to tell me that you're going to move Nelson Aguilar, who has thrived in the slot, back outside.
No, I would not do that.
That's a fool's errand.
Yeah, I agree.
You hurt
100%.
your offense, you hurt your quarterback, you hurt Carson Wentz. But let me ask you this question, because I think that part of deciding whether or not you're bringing Alshon back is weighing it against what you can and can't do moving forward. They've already locked up Tim Jernigan, which I think was offseason priority 1 or 1A going into this offseason. So that's off the checklist. That's money that's allocated. It's already spent. Outside of your Carson Wentz extension and outside of maybe re-signing and extending Brandon Graham, what are the other priorities that the Eagles have to address this offseason?
Well,
that you're allocating that money
there was
for?
going to maybe be a Jordan Hicks extension, but now that looks like that might not happen. I believe Ronald Darby is eligible, but I'm not 100% sure about that. No, I mean,
think
look,
he's under control for 2 years.
Alshon is a priority, I agree, but the only point is, like, let's say you have 6 guys. Let's say we could list 6 guys, right? And maybe, obviously, the first guy's way more important than the 6th, but it might be a point where if you sign the top guy, you're saying goodbye to, 3, 4, 5, 6. Like Bo Allen, like the question is, who would you rather have? I'll throw this by you. Alshon? And this is a very big hypothetical. But
I love these rapid hypotheticals
right,
we
right.
dive into.
Okay, so
they
Alshon...
always get to say something stupid like I trade Carson Wentz for Khalil Mack.
Well, I gave you an out on that, and you stuck with, hey, we all have takes, All right, so look, Alshon or Bradham, Robinson, Bo Allen, and Blunt.
Alshon, easily.
Okay.
No contest.
I'm just saying, and I'm not saying I don't fall on one side or the other for that, but I'm just saying, like, one of the reasons this team has been so good is because of their depth. And, if you let 4 or 5 guys walk and you replace them with unknowns, it's a question mark. It just is. And like I said at the beginning, I do think the success of this team impacts what you do with Alshon. Because, look, I guess the argument can be made if you win the Super Bowl, you just let him walk and who cares.
Right.
But there is going to be more pressure to bring Alshon back if this team makes it to the championship game, and he's a part of that. And he will be a part of that. And I mean, more than likely, if they make championship game, Alshon's going to be a part of that. So I guess where I'm at 10 games into the season compared to where I was is I'm more willing to re-sign him. My price tag's gone up. I used to say I would pay $6 or $7 million. Now I'm probably more at 9, maybe 10-ish.
Okay.
I would get a little worried around 13, but I think it's reaching a point where you got to bring him back.
I agree.
Because just for a lot of reasons. Like, you look at what Aguilar and Ertz have done in the second year with Wentz, and I think Alshon could have that type of jump in production. And I just don't think you want a ton of turnover, especially for a team that is going to win 13 games. Like, the Eagles might not win the Super Bowl this year. They probably won't, just statistically speaking. Andy Reid's team didn't win the Super Bowl that first year after they went to the championship game and lost to the Rams. It's going to take a little bit of time for this team, but I think if they don't win it this year, you're looking at a 2018 team, barring a ton of turnover, that is going to be one of the favorites to win the Super Bowl, and will be better equipped to win the Super Bowl because they'll have been through a year.
Will they be better equipped, though? I mean, I think the experience is going to count, but I just think that the landscape of the NFL next year is going to look so different, assuming that Aaron Rodgers stays healthy.
But here's the thing, and I am Team Aaron Rodgers as well, and I don't think, like, the Eagles are also a very good team, and Carson Wentz is also a very good quarterback.
Well,
so,
listen,
yes,
I'm
even
not
if Rodgers
trying
was
to
here,
take-
it's tougher with Rodgers, but I still think even if Aaron Rodgers comes back, which he clearly will,
Sure.
you look at the NFC next year, let's just forget whatever happens the rest of this year. You look at the NFC next year, and you say the Packers, the Eagles,
Cowboys.
the
you
Cowboys, I
get
guess,
Eliot
but I think
back.
I would put the Rams ahead of them.
Yeah.
Maybe the Vikings,
Saints
depending.
again.
Yeah, so I mean, there are teams, but I think regardless of whether it's tough or not, the Eagles are still one of the best teams in the
And
conference.
listen, I'm
entering next
not
year.
trying to take anything away from the Eagles by saying this. I just think that when you look at everything that's happened around them this year, it's breaking perfectly for them to make the run. Whereas
Right. No, I agree,
next
yeah.
year, you could see a significant injury that this team takes and has to overcome. Or you could see Jared Goff continue to develop. Or you could see the Seahawks rebound and retool.
Right,
over
but I
the
guess what
offseason.
I'm saying is this Eagles team is presently constructed will be a Super Bowl contender in 2018.
I agree
So,
they'll be a
but
Super
if-
Bowl
if
contender,
you-
but I don't think that their chances of winning the Super Bowl go up based on everything that's happened this year that you can't bank on happening.
Yeah,
next
that's
year.
fair. I mean, I guess I would agree with you that the experience factor, which I think helps, is it weighs out the fact that there's a lot of injuries. So I see that point. But I guess what I'm saying is it's reached a point where you have to bring Alshon back, in my opinion.
Yep.
So
I agree.
the question is just how much does it cost?
Welcome to the bandwagon. There's a seat over there
right.
for you.
But I'm still like $13 million. I'd still get a little nervous there. But all right, so before we wrap this up, Eagles are, I think, 13.5-point favorites over the Bears.
Take whatever money you get from your lovable aunt or your grandmother and bet it all on the Eagles.
You think they win by 13?
I think they hang a 50 spot on this team. Twice in 3 weeks. How you like that?
I mean, the Bears. I agree. The Bears are a competitive team. I don't have it in front of me. I imagine they haven't gotten blown out very often. I do think the Eagles cover just because they've smoked teams all year, and I don't think this team is really susceptible to a letdown. That being said, like for all the times we've talked about letdown games, and I bit into thinking the Cardinals will be a letdown. I mean, Thanksgiving week, coming off the Cowboys, you're about to go to Seattle, home, 1:00, bad team. Like this is. The trap game is the one you never see coming, so it's hard to say it's a trap game. But this does have trap game elements.
I agree.
That being said, I just think the Eagles are too good. Then I think they win by 13 plus.
Yeah, I think they win something like 53-13.
All right, wow. I'm gonna say like mid-30s to like in the teens. Like I mean, it'll be like kind of like the Cowboys game.
Yeah.
But I think they'll come out quicker.
I agree, and I just don't think with a rookie quarterback, and don't sleep on Jordan Howard. He could rush for 120 yards and
against
2 touchdowns.
This team,
but I don't think that even running the ball that effectively against the Eagles' number one rushing defense, I don't think that's enough. I don't think that a one-trick pony type of team has a chance to knock off the Eagles.
Agreed. All right, so we both agree they're going to win. We're both now in the re-sign Alshon camp. We maybe disagree a little bit on the price, but I don't even think that much. I'm going to give you
one more chance to redeem yourself with your stupid food taste. Okay? Give me your favorite Thanksgiving side dish on the way out of here.
Well, would you consider stuffing a side dish?
Oh, dude, thank you. Stuffing is
all right, yeah,
number
so stuffing
one
would
for
be
me.
one.
Far and away number one.
I'm not super big on sweet potatoes.
I hate sweet potatoes.
I like them, though. I like sweet potato fries.
We found some common ground on food. I didn't know that was possible.
That's something to be thankful
for.
There we go. All right, guys. Everyone enjoy their Thanksgiving. We will talk to you after the Bears game on Sunday.